This is the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast, hosted by David Charlton, and you're listening to this podcast to help you build your own mental toughness, or so that you can support other people or your clients better. Either way, you will learn more about developing this plastic personality trait that all but guarantees that you will perform better and lead a more prosperous life. Welcome to the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast with your host, David Charlton. And today I chat to a fellow mental toughness, or certainly the 4C's advocate in Paul Trainer, who's a former professional rugby league player. He's now a director for Super League team Salford Red Devils Rugby League Club. And he has his own business called Positive Synergy, where he works as a coach, consultant, trainer, and educator with individuals and organizations to improve their performance through the development of mental toughness and enhancing their leadership skills. Paul also has a wealth of experience in education. And today we go on to discuss mental toughness in professional rugby league, how mental toughness applies to his current role as a director. We also touch on his consultancy work. So if you're looking to learn more about the 4C's model, this is a great podcast episode to listen to. Hi, Paul. It's great to have you on the show. Would you be able to explain to the listeners a little bit about your background and your interest in rugby league?
First of all, thanks for having me on, David. I really enjoy listening to the podcast, and it's a real pleasure to be on, speaking to you about mental toughness and my background and my context as well. In terms of my background, so I played professional rugby league for a number of years, had to retire early due to an injury, and then became a PE teacher and worked my way through to be a leader in schools at vice principal, assistant principal level. Worked in schools for nearly 20 years, and then made the decision to concentrate full-time on my business, which is called Positive Synergy. Alongside that, I'm also a director at Salford Red Devils. So I've gone from the journey from playing in Salford Red Devils Academy as a 16-year-old. I've been a fan of the club for too many years now. Probably about 36 years I've been watching. But then in June 2018 became a director, and I've been on the board of directors since that point. So it's a bit of a varied CV, really. In terms of the rugby side of it, that journey from being a fan to a player to a director is probably pretty different to most people, but it's something that I'm really proud of, and it's a privilege to do. But hopefully all of my experiences in different sectors, certainly can add to the value that I can offer to the club and also to working with the business as well.
You've certainly given me a few options now to be able to dig in and pick your brains. So we'll start with your definition of mental toughness in a rugby league setting.
I think, certainly when I reflect back to playing in the 90s, the kind of concept of mental toughness then was very much about bravado and, kind of not being seen to be injured and, how many knocks you could get through. And I think, as the game has progressed and obviously, and times have moved on, I think when we look at it today, it is that, understanding that, rugby league is a very physical game, a very challenging game. And it's how we respond to the challenges that presents, but also being prepared to take risks, being prepared to trust the process, being prepared to respond to the challenges that are faced in the game. As I say, it's a very physical game, very tough for the players to play. And actually, in the past couple of years, there's been lots of changes to rules in rugby league, which has meant the game has got even faster and the ball's in play for even more time. So that in itself has added to the challenges of the game. And like any team sport, it's about, mental toughness is being shown about, your commitment to your own development and also commitment to the team as well. And being prepared to do what's necessary over a long period of time to make sure that you can perform at your best on and off the field.
You mentioned there about not being seen to be injured. Do you want to just share a little bit more information on that, how it's changed?
And I think probably this is true in a number of sports as well. I know certainly when I was playing, it was it wasn't quite just the cold sponge on your head and then you get back to play. But, certainly in terms of things like head injuries, where perhaps in the 90s, it was about just making sure you're okay and then getting back playing as soon as you can. Obviously now with all of the research that's gone into head injuries, particularly in contact sports like rugby league, where the players, now get very well looked after. They have to take tests at the start of the season, and every time they get a head injury in a game, they have to go off and have a compulsory head injury assessment. I think that perception of toughness and mental toughness has evolved over time, where it's not just about, grin and bear it and, don't show the opposition that you're in pain or you're injured, you just carry on, to now one of, backed by evidence, backed by science, to make sure that the players are looked after in the best way possible. And I've seen on a day-to-day basis, at the club now and just at the sport in general, how well the players are looked after, and how well the game, the things that the game is putting in place to make the game as safe as possible. Not just at the elite level either, also as for kids coming through. And, I think that the research into particular things like head injuries now is having a significant and a positive impact on the sport.
I suppose from a player's perspective, though, that there's always going to be that difficulty, because they'll always want to play, won't they? And then how truthful they are with a coach sometimes will be questioned.
Yeah, and I think, again, the head injury aspect is very factual now. If they fail the head injury assessment, the player can't come on, and then there's a graduated return to play protocol. In terms of, just injuries in general, again, you would always want to play, but I think there's also that trust and an understanding and commitment to the group that, if you know yourself you're not right, that, you're actually doing your teammates a disservice if you're going into that environment and playing. Because, again, in rugby league, there's only a certain number of substitutions you can make. And if you're going in, not fully fit, and you're not fully fit and not communicating that could have a real impact on the game plan that the coach puts in place if there's a substitution that has to be made really early. So it's like in any sport, you'd always want to play and you'd always want to be successful. But I think also there's that honesty and trust in your teammates and your coaching staff that you've got to be honest with people.
As I know, you're also like an MTQ practitioner, so you know the model, the 4Cs model really well. I'm just wondering there, you've got me thinking if there's elements of the model which actually explain the behaviour of a player who basically doesn't tell the truth and plays when they are injured. I'm thinking, I wonder if their confidence in their ability is less than the norm, if you like. So then I suppose they're frightened about being dropped in the future and things like that.
Yeah, and I think, also, I think you're absolutely right there, David. And I think it's also about, that kind of almost like, trying to control what you can control and getting on the field as much as you can, and hoping that will be enough. But actually what we're trying to get, and what you'd want, I would guess, from any player is that honesty and that confidence in the fact that, well, actually my teammates can do it without me. And also having the confidence to be able to get back in the team when you're fully fit and firing. And, there's that's a reflection of culture as well, I guess, as much as it is of individuals.
Yeah, most definitely. Again, earlier you mentioned there about having to retire down to injury. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that? Was that a difficult time for you?
Yeah, it was. It was just, I had to have a knee reconstruction, which, I was told basically, if it goes again, it can't be repaired. And this was just at a time where I was training to be a PE teacher, and I didn't want to go into a job as a PE teacher and start my career and then not be able to teach practical stuff because I was injured. But I was still hopeful of because at the time a lot of rugby league was part time, even at the higher level. So I was still hopeful of being able to play and combine that with a teaching career. So it was difficult. I still played other sports and was able to once I recovered from a knee reconstruction. But the reality of the plan A not being workable was something that was a challenge. And I remember at the time, you kind of had all sorts of plans and then you're having to rewrite them. But for me, fortunately, I had some good people around me. My mum and dad were fantastic. And also, I was able to then immerse myself fully in the teaching, and also play some sport, which quenched my thirst for being competitive, because I'm probably the most competitive person I know, even playing with my kids in the back garden. So I think that's important. You've still got something to fill that gap.
So your kids are going to be well drilled in learning to deal with failure then.
Absolutely. I'm sure I'll have a chart at some point to record the results of the cricket and football and rugby we play in the back garden.
Well, let's touch on your role as a director then at Salford Red Devils, and where does mental toughness fit in with that role?
So it comes through in a number of ways, really. So I've been on the board at Salford for it's just coming up to 4 years now, and in that time, the context of the club, we're the only club in Super League that doesn't have a benefactor. So we run the club as a business, and in the time that I've been involved as a director, we've made huge strides forwards as a club, and I think kind of is epitomised, not explicitly by mental toughness, but kind of sums up the way we approach our work. Without being able to go to a benefactor to invest lots of money in. We've reached a grand final, which is kind of the major final in Super League, which takes place at Old Trafford every year. The first one the club had ever got to. We reached the Challenge Cup final the year after, and we've prided ourselves on the way as a club, both on and off the field, that we approach what we do. We're very keen that we reflect the place that we come from and the people that we represent and the city that we're part of. And that's hard working, building, a very strong culture, maximising everything you've got, whether it be players on the field or the resources we've got off the field. So it's kind of epitomised what we've done over that period of time, and we're really pleased, and we're continuing to strive to do things that give us a competitive edge. Whilst not necessarily being able to spend thousands and thousands of pounds on various things. What we can do is we ensure that we spend wisely, and we have a very strong culture which allows everybody within the club to achieve to the best of their potential. So it's, in terms of the specifics of my role, so I'm the board lead on player pathway. I also lead on what we call our Building the Future strategy, which is looking at developing the next generation of Salford Red Devils players and Salford Red Devils fans, whilst also leaving a legacy in the areas we work. So we're really fortunate. We probably have, outside of London and Newcastle, we probably have the biggest catchment area, biggest target area of any rugby league club. And what we're looking to do there is to go into schools and community clubs and not only coach them about rugby, but we're also doing work around mental toughness, raising achievement, positive mental health. So we're actually, as I say, we're wanting to leave a legacy. We're not just about coming in to teach rugby and pick off the best talent and then leave. We want to really make a difference. So mental toughness is coming across in that respect through the Building the Future strategy. What we're also doing is we did some work with our reserve team squad in their pre-season camp, where I did some work specifically around mental toughness with them and applying it to their context and using the 4C model. And the context of that is that was a brand new squad, and we're really seeing some fantastic progress from them and the staff within the reserve team competition, with some players, kind of already showing themselves forward for potentially for promotion to the first team squad. We're also about to embark on a really exciting project, which will work across the first team and reserve team squads using the MTQ Plus questionnaire, which will allow us to create some group and individual interventions linked to the 4Cs. Will also give us some really valuable data in terms of impact as well. So we're not just looking at performance on the field. We'll be able to look at the pre-project score on the MTQ Plus and then the post-project and see what impact we've had there as well. So we're really excited about that because, again, it fits in with what we're trying to do. We'll take our people and try to make the very best and support them to be the very best they can be.
I suppose with that data as well, it's going to help you like moving forward with youngsters and looking at the qualities the first team have got and then being able to develop them and specifically in a targeted way.
Yeah, and again, it will kind of work its way down. My hope this won't just be a one-off. What we're looking to do is to kind of broaden this all the time so it becomes embedded in our approach. So when, young players come onto our pathway, both both boys and girls. We run pathways for our men's team and also for our women's team. Is that we will kind of start our work with mental toughness when they come in, potentially at 12 or 13 years old. And then as they're working their way through it, it will become, more embedded and more natural to what they want to do. The other side of this, and this is something, again, that's really important to us as a club, is, we're developing skills in people that actually aren't just about rugby, they're about life. So when they come to the end of their career, whatever stage that is, that actually we've added some value to them as people. And I genuinely believe, and this is obviously backed up by the research, but I genuinely believe that, mental toughness is an absolutely crucial skill. Whether you're a Super League professional, with a 15-year career, or you're somebody who doesn't quite make it, who then goes on to coach young children or goes on to set up your own business or whatever, mental toughness is going to serve you very well in that.
Yeah, I know. Certainly when I'm working with athletes, I always try to stress the point that, we're working on your sport, but ultimately, this is going to overlap into your life, your everyday life as well. And if you've got other interests, education, work, and what have you. So, it's a huge, huge thing.
Yeah, and when we did, for example, when we worked with the reserve team and we were looking at game-specific applications of things, so how do you respond to a mistake? You've made a mistake in the first minute, how do you respond to it? But it's also then relating that to the working life or the studies at university, so they can see the transferability of it and the fact it's not just about supporting rugby league development, it's about, developing them as people.
I'd imagine yourself and your mental toughness that's been stretched over the last couple of years. Obviously, you're working in education. You've got the role as the director, and then you've got your own business as well. Do you want to just share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's certainly, and probably the same for most people. It's been a tough couple of years, and I think certainly. From my perspective, I was vice principal at a school in Manchester, which is where I first became aware of the 4Cs model. I was really fortunate to be in a school that we actually taught mental toughness as a subject area because we saw it as being that important. So that was where I kind of first became aware of mental toughness concept, and I made the decision just before the pandemic to leave my role in school and go full time on my business, which obviously, and that notice period ended 3 weeks before the pandemic started. So I kind of left a full-time role, fantastic full-time role in a school, and went into full-time consultancy business, I think it was 2.5 weeks before the pandemic started. So that, that in itself is a challenge. And, I think it's important that people can see, certainly the clients that, you kind of live by what you're not just presenting something that, is convenient to present. You're presenting something that you hopefully model on a day-to-day basis as well. So I think that's an important part of the narrative. But certainly it's been a challenging couple of years. And, I think there's some changes that have taken place, which will kind of remain with us. We've talked about, the online aspect of consultancy and supporting people. Hopefully now, we're well on the way to getting everything back to normal, and we can start to look at, that longer term plan of clients and people are more open to having external people in the business now.
So in your business, there's a number of you, and you work in education, sport, and business. Do you just want to share with the listeners how you go about your work and what it entails?
Yeah, so there's myself and a guy called Lee Mossop in the business. Lee's a director, and Lee's experience. Lee is a former Super League player, played at the highest level for 12, 13 years, had a hugely successful career, both internationally. He also went to play in the NRL in Australia, which is kind of like the highest club level competition in the world. Had significant challenges, had a large number of shoulder reconstructions, and was advised to retire on a number of occasions, but carried on playing because once he came to Salford, we kind of found a good way to get the best out of him and to look after his shoulder. And he continued his career probably on 5 years longer than it should have been. And he's got a fantastic story to tell, both as an epitome of mental toughness with how he's gone about his career, but also his experience as a leader, his experience in high performing teams. So hugely benefit from Lee's experience within the business. And we work with individuals and organisations in sport, business and education to develop performance. And a lot of our work centres around mental toughness. So when we're talking about leadership development or we're working with a team to improve their performance collectively, I always find ourselves coming back to mental toughness, because I think that's at the hub of everything we're trying to do. If you want to be a great leader, you're going to have to show evidence of mental toughness, and you're going to have to develop your own mental toughness, within a team environment. We've talked about rugby league specifically, but I think in many team sports, there is all sorts of examples of where you'll need mental toughness to allow you to perform to the best of your potential. So we've got quite a lot of varied work. We do a lot of work in schools with school staff and also with students. And it just shows, for me, it kind of reinforces the power of mental toughness, because it can be applied across so many concepts and contexts. And also what we're seeing is, people can very quickly see the application of it. And that's a key part of our work, is for, it's not just about this is what mental toughness is. It's about getting them to reflect on and to plan on almost, where are they going to show that? How can they show that? If you're doing an exam in 6 months' time, so you open the exam paper and you can't do question 1 and question 2, what are you going to do? And almost that, when we talk about control, planning for certain things to happen and what your response is going to be, because it's always really, and I'm sure, David, you all speak about this with your clients all the time, it's not the event that brings the outcome, it's the response of the person to the event which brings the outcome. So it's fantastic, and it's so varied. We're working within elite sport, we're working within football and rugby league, working with businesses, leadership teams in businesses, and also within schools. So it's absolutely love it. It's been a tough couple of years, but it's something we're really passionate about.
Do you think the interpersonal confidence element of mental toughness is something which is, I don't know, sometimes overlooked, but is like a huge part certainly in a team setting or in a leadership team setting?
Yeah, I think, I don't know if it's overlooked, but I think sometimes I agree with you. It's kind of, something which is seen down the pecking order and seen potentially as being something which, people have either got or they haven't. And again, it's as with the rest of the mental toughness model, that whole perception that, if we make it really explicit and people practicing it, then they can get better at it. And certainly within a team sport, that interpersonal confidence is huge, isn't it? And it's not about being that biggest character in the room or owning a meeting or being a leader. It's just about the way you go about your business. And again, that transfers itself to any group of people. I think, where you've got your behaviours, you've got your way of working, and trusting trusting that process to work, but also understanding your bit in that jigsaw, and being prepared to speak up when things aren't right, being confident enough to challenge people over things, and that whole concept of, the dysfunctions of a team from Lencioni is, about positive disagreement, and that being, really important in high performing teams. And I think that's something that, is kind of backed up with the work around interpersonal confidence.
Yeah, and that can obviously be the difficulty with younger players and players just coming through, isn't it? To actually be able to have the confidence to voice their opinions in the group. Yeah. And again, that lad, it comes down to culture, doesn't it? Where it's there is not only the mechanism and the process to be able to speak up, whether that be in team meetings or in individual meetings, but also that it's seen as being an important part, and creating a developmental culture where, it's important that, to use that well-worn phrase, better never stops. And if you've got something which can contribute to that, then you should say it. And I think, perhaps in days gone by where kind of people had to earn the stripes and, work the way to be able to speak and to comment on things and work the way through the team to become experienced members of the team, I think it's really important that everybody within any team sees themselves as being integral to that. And, if they've got something which is, an idea which can make things better, that they're confident enough to speak about it. Because, just carrying on doing the same thing all the time is not good for anybody. There certainly seems to be a lot more knowledge about psychological safety in elite sport now. So I know blame cultures do exist, but they're not such a big thing now.
Yeah, and I've been reading a really good book recently, Bill Walsh, the NFL coach, and it talks about, the whole thing about kind of changing the San Francisco 49ers from being a really underperforming, really badly run team. And Bill Walsh, and the book's called The Score Takes Care of Itself. And it's all about, creating a set of behaviors, creating a way of working, standards, which the whole organization worked to. And one of the key bits of him and his time, we're talking in the 80s here, but all of his work was around kind of, the way we speak to each other, the way people react. There was no kind of initiations or anything like that into new teams. So a guy who was perhaps ahead of his time. But it is that thing of, kind of ensuring that people feel part of a team, feel part of a culture, part of a community. And in team sports as well, like rugby league, it's also important to consider the wider family as well, because, when the players are away at games and, we've got 2 French teams in Super League, so that the players are away for a period of time, going away at pre-season, to consider wives and families as part of that as well, and building a big community, not just the 30 guys who might be in the first team squad.
Yeah, no, fascinating stuff. And it's a tricky one as well when you've got a lot of hormones and like younger people involved in it. Obviously, there's generally a lot of banter thrown around, and it's just that fine line at times. Yeah,
absolutely, and it's. You want there to be a kind of positive, upbeat culture, and our head coach at Salford, Paul Rowley, he's huge about culture and creating a very strong culture which has key trademark behaviours. And when you think about things like psychological safety, when you think about developing mental toughness, it's like the letters through a stick of rock, isn't it? Really, you want your culture to, wherever you break that stick of rock, the lettering's still the same. And in the same way with whether it's a young player, your captain, somebody who's just joined the club mid-season, you want them to understand what being a part of your team is about, and the behaviours that are expected, and the culture we're trying to create, because you want everybody to play the part.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. So yeah, as we begin to wrap up then, Paul, are you able to share with the listeners 3 key takeaways from our conversation?
Well, I think that the overriding one for me is understanding the power of mental toughness. Like I say, I've seen this work in education, working in a school in an area of high deprivation, and the power that developing mental toughness can have. So I think the first thing is about the power and harnessing the power of developing mental toughness. Secondly, I think it's about understanding the culture of an organisation and the features of the culture of that organisation. Like I said previously, it's when we work with our clients through positive synergy, it's all about, what are the trademark behaviours and can we identify them? And actually, when we're working with people on mental toughness, it's about, how can they show that every day? What can that trademark be? And ensuring that's part of the work on a daily basis. So it's being clear on what your habits are, I think, and those habits of the mind as well, as part of that. And thirdly, I think for me, it's a huge thing about perception of challenge. And again, we've talked through all sorts of things during the podcast about, being injured and kind of response to the pandemic. And I think one of the biggest things for people to take away is kind of how you perceive challenge, and there are always challenging times, whatever you're doing, aren't there? And it's kind of about, those people who are mentally tough kind of embracing that challenge and seeing it as an opportunity rather than seeing it as a threat. And I think it's really important that people kind of will consider, what can I benefit out of this, rather than thinking straight away because it's a challenge, something's a bad thing.
That's true. Then, looking at who can support them, what resources they've got available, and then, dig in there and go for it.
Absolutely.
The first one you mentioned there about the power of mental toughness, I mean, the research will tell you that when it comes down to performance, I'm pretty sure mental toughness has up to a 25% variation in performance. So that speaks for itself. And as Carol Dweck's work around growth mindset is global, isn't it? It's shouted about in lots of places, but I don't know. I think there's an argument to say that certainly the 4C's mental toughness model is even more powerful in my eyes.
Yeah, I think, and I've done and throughout my teaching career, whether it's because of my being in an elite sporting environment as a young man, but I've always kind of worked with students and staff around mindset and motivation, and the work of Carol Dweck really resonated with me, and we did a lot of work around it in the schools I was in, and actually one of the challenges for that work is it sometimes just becomes a wall display in a school, and we talk about being a growth mindset classroom, but actually it's not in any behaviours. It's just kind of something that's laminated and referred to every now and then. As I say, the work of Carol Dweck is really insightful, and actually for me it forms a part of the work around mental toughness. But mental toughness is so broad, so much broader, and encompasses so many different things. But actually, it's the same result, isn't it? It's that kind of what we're looking to do to get people to see what they can do to make themselves more mentally tough, what they can do habitually to create a more positive mindset, a growth mindset. And I know from reading, around mental toughness and reading Doug and Peter's book, they refer to growth mindset as one of the things which kind of, is a supporting concept, if you like. But again, it's that thing of bringing it to life rather than it just being, a list of things that we might do at some point.
Yeah, but I just emphasise that I'm not against Carol Dweck's work, and I agree that certainly her work definitely supports what Doug and Peter and John are doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, a big thank you for your time today, Paul. Whereabouts can the listeners reach out to you if they want to have a conversation?
So I'm on LinkedIn at Paul Trainer. I'm on Twitter at pos_synergy. I have a website as well, www.positivesynergy.co.uk.
Excellent. All of that information will go in the show notes if anybody wants to reach out to you. Again, a big thank you for your time.
No, pleasure, David. Really enjoyed speaking to you, and look forward to doing it again at some point.
That'll be good, yeah. Much appreciated. So again, this was a really enjoyable podcast episode to record, and it took me back to my beginnings and my interest in mental toughness and this particular framework, the 4Cs model. It started with my studies as an undergraduate and as a postgraduate, studying health and organisational psychology, and then with sports psychology as I went on to do my master's degree. At that point, I was well and truly hooked and bought in. I loved the simpleness of the model. It's really, really straightforward to understand. And I felt it did explain a lot about the way people behave the way they do. I was really engaged in the lectures and the workshops, and I wanted to learn more. So I went on to read an awful lot of journals and work from Peter Clough and his colleagues. So that was my first taste of the model. The next layer, though, was after I did 2 years supervised practice training to become a chartered psychologist. I went on to do some research, and I recognised that Doug Stryachik and his organisation, AQR International, actually held a licence for the mental toughness framework. And to become a mental toughness practitioner, I could actually go on and do some further training with them. At this point in time, I was a little bit stuck. I was torn. I had a real interest for organisational psychology, organisational culture, as well as sports psychology. So I went on to do the mental toughness practitioner training, and that taught me an awful lot more about the model. It gave me an awful lot more depth. And it's fair to say, interviewing and now creating 126 podcasts on mental toughness and linking most to this framework, the depth of my knowledge has improved dramatically. So where am I going with this? Well, as Paul alluded to, when he works with Salford Red Devils, they look to measure mental toughness. Also in his work in schools with leadership teams and pupils, they also do some measuring as well. So I want to get the message out there that there's a lot of power in actually measuring mental toughness, both at an individual level and as a club or an organisation. If we think about it at a group level, so with an organisation, let's say we'll use sport as the theme. So let's say there's a squad of players, 20 players, and there's support staff and coaches. And as we look through the measurements, we notice that the attacking players have a low risk orientation. So in general, they're afraid to make mistakes, essentially. And maybe the coaches also have that as well. Now, there's a pattern of developing there, and that's something we can look to question and to develop and recognize, and then put some different strategies in place. Also, maybe it might be that we notice interpersonal confidence is low in defensive players, for argument's sake. So that would mean that the defensive players are maybe a quieter bunch than normal, that they're not going to be the greatest organisers. They're not going to speak up loudly in the group. So when criticism's dished out, they might not like it. So as I say, by measuring mental toughness in this way, it really can be very, very powerful. It can make you certainly a lot more aware of individuals and little groups and larger groups in your squads across your workforce. Then you can go on and put some specific development plans in place. And it's really useful to measure mental toughness at the start of a season or the year, in the middle, and at the end. That way we can measure progress. We can see if the developmental activities and tools and interventions are actually paying off. And last thing, if you think of what Salford Red Devils are doing, you could actually go through an entire club and measure mental toughness across various different age groups. Now, that would be amazing to do that for a whole club. If you did that for a period of 5, 6, 7 years, you're going to come back with lots of fantastic data. You're going to see some patterns there. So maybe at 14 or at 15 or 16, there's going to be different traits that people harness and show. And perhaps if you're doing it at first team level as well, you can then identify what it is that you need to be looking to develop in your younger players. And as well as the players, it might well identify some flaws in coaches or support staff because of the way they communicate, and the same with leaders too. So, yeah, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about measuring mental toughness and the reports that can be offered, please do get in touch. I'd love to have a conversation with you. You'll find my email address, info@sport-excellence.co.uk, is in the show notes, or you can join the Sports Psychology Hub, a Facebook group where you can contact me directly. Take care and have a great week.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast with David Charlton, do check out my website, sport-excellence.co.uk, and my online sports psychology resources. The Sport-Excellence website has essential resources for anyone looking to build their own mental toughness or the mental toughness of their athletes or teams, or if you want to achieve peak performance more often or optimal functioning. The Sport Excellence website has everything you need to keep moving forward and thrive. So go on, head over to sport-excellence.co.uk to find out more.